stuff that we do. So there is a spot, I think there is a spot for everyone. It's just finding that spot for you and your friends. And what I do is like way over the top, like to the upteenth level. And that has been a challenge as well, because like I'll edit the video, I'll make the video, I'm like, dang, that was so authentic, that was so awesome to do. And then I'll upload it and like, or I'll ask like a friend that is not in the scene, like, oh, what do you think of this? It's like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what you're talking about. It's like, damn. So that's like a constant battle I have now, is if I take things to like the most authentic level, it becomes incredibly hard for the audience to digest, because it is so far down that road that they can't even understand what is being said or what is happening.
Yeah.
Hey, she's a beauty.
Welcome to Tarkov, a podcast for content creators to come on and share their stories, experiences, and advice. And I am super excited. I have one of the legends of YouTube, Karmakut. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited. It's going to be a good time, I think.
Yeah, a laid back, chill conversation. That's all this is. All
awesome.
Right.
Perfect.
So the way we start things off, we just do sort of 3 random questions that get the juices flowing. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So as a little kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Ooh, that's a crazy one. Honestly, I've never been one to like think too far ahead. Like I think, even as an adult with like what I was doing with my, career, like what I want to do, even after I had some schooling, I didn't really know. But even as a kid, I kind of just took what was in front of me immediately. I never thought too far.
Nice.
What I can say is that like as a kid, like dressing up for Halloween, I was always like an army man or something like that. Played a lot of like the Green Army Men video games, so that kind of influenced me a lot.
Yeah.
But outside of that, like I really had no idea what I wanted to do, long term, or if as a grown up.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So next question. So you're out in Cali. What's your favorite thing about where you live?
Oh, it's got to be the food.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be the food. I don't even go to the beach too much. I don't really like do, any of the party or night scene. It's definitely just the ability to have like any kind of food within 20 minutes. It's definitely the best thing, I think.
All right. Well, that'll lead into the next one then. So you're going out to your favorite spot. What are you getting?
Ooh, oh God, there's so much. I'd have to say, like, it's probably going to be sushi of some sort. Yeah, probably sushi or Korean barbecue, I think, are at the top of my list. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, I've never had any Korean barbecue or Korean fried chicken. And there's also, I think this is more of a Japanese thing, but the katsu curry.
Yeah, there's so much food. If you ever come to LA, I'll know all the spots to show you. Yeah, it's God, I'm pretty close to Koreatown, but then I'm also close to like all the good Chinese spots.
Yeah.
Italian places, the taco trucks. It's just insanity out here.
Excellent. Awesome. All right. So you're Karmakut. You're a content creator for the tactical first-person shooter RTS sort of genre, Milsim. Where does the name come from first?
The name actually, funnily enough, comes from a Yu-Gi-Oh card. As I was growing up, I played a lot of those card games, collecting things and playing with friends as like, a 10-year-old or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think it was Warcraft 3 was the first online PC game that I played, and you needed to have a username. And so I wasn't too creative back then with names. So I just picked up one of the cards that I had, and it was Karmakut, except spelled with a C. So I just put the K on there to be, I don't know, a little different, and that's where that came from.
Oh shoot, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So before you found the YouTube, career, what was your sort of what did you do beforehand? What's your background?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, it was like pretty much just a lot of wandering. I was just going through the motions, I guess you could say, of going to high school, and then my family, and just like culturally, like the next thing you do after high school is college, and you get your degree, and then you make money and get a job. But I was just mulling about, just kind of like going through the motions of college, and during college was when one of my friends, Termy, an online gaming buddy, that I'd been playing with for a while showed me Squad, and that was pretty much how I got started. So I just was uploading an unedited raw gameplay of like this game that I really enjoyed playing, and
Yeah.
it just one thing led to the next, and here I am, I guess.
Wow. And now, but you hit a good point though. Like today, is your path is high school, then university or college, and then, your career afterwards. But, at 18, 19, how many kids know what they want to do? And to make such a big decision, it's
Mhm.
tough.
Yeah, it's definitely it was also at like it was pretty early on in like the YouTube stuff. There's still some big YouTubers, but I didn't ever even think that being a YouTuber could be a job. Like back then growing up, the biggest like thing in gaming that you could become was either a developer for a
Mm-hmm.
game or it was like MLG if you remember what that was. It was
Yeah.
like the Major League Halo players, like that was or Call of Duty players. That was the only two things you could really do. I didn't really see too much like other style like content creation aside from like maybe Minecraft YouTubers,
Yeah.
but it was still pretty new. So being able to roll into it was like I honestly did it pretty blind. Just kind of stumbled into it a little bit.
Well, there is no back then there was no path. There's no how-to guys. There's no classes or anything like that. You're sort of the Wild West essentially.
Yeah, it was very new. It was pretty cool, but it's crazy how everything played out, I guess.
So, and now that everything's played out, what do the parents think? Like, because I'm sure it is, I'm unique because I'm 50 and I get gaming. I grew up gaming, but, most parents probably don't look at this like you make video game videos. Really? That's.
Definitely, yeah, yeah. Especially coming from like the cultural side of things, which is like very academic
Mm-hmm.
heavy, very financially motivated. It was there were some points of friction, most
Yes.
definitely. There was a lot of like culturally, I'm also like the oldest son on my mother's side,
Mm-hmm.
so I set the example for all my younger cousins.
Oh,
So
okay.
there was a lot of familial turmoil for a little bit. But my dad was very supportive in giving me a shot, and he kind of understands a little bit. Just when you feel like you need to do something, you want to do something, you
Yeah.
you kind of have to do it. So I was able to kind of rely on him for a little bit as I got set up and started, and then as soon as I finally broke through and like the money came in, and I was like, being able to support myself,
Yeah.
everything magically, instantly becomes okay. It's just okay, all right, we're fine now.
Yeah. And
But
now
it's very funny how that works.
And now you're the proud son. You're like, hey, yes, everyone's, mom and dad's talking about you, and the cousins now can talk to you, and everything is good.
Yeah, yeah, they see it now as a business instead of just video games. They're like, oh yeah, he's a successful businessman.
Yes,
It's like in my brain, I still just play video games, but yeah, it's so funny how all that changes once you get some money coming in.
absolutely. And now, going back to the early days of video games, what are some of your, video games that stick out as some of your favorites?
I think definitely Halo was like a big one growing up. I remember that was probably one of the first major console games I played as a kid. Like I had no business playing such a gory game as a kid, but a lot of my friends had access to like GTA and like
Oh,
Halo, so
yeah.
I'd go over and they'd show me, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But aside from that, I played like typical Pokemon on Game Boy stuff. We played a lot of the Green Army Men games. I think was definitely a big influence in my interest in like military culture to a
Yeah.
degree. Um, and then a lot of card games, a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But that's pretty much I think the earliest kinds of games that I played.
All right. And how about from like a movie or TV show standpoint?
Mm.
What drove you into that sort of, or made you like the whole sort of military side of things?
It's funny you ask that because I always have this conversation with my parents because they never there's I have no military connection within the family. No one in the family is served just because like I've had I'm like first generation, so like
Hmm.
I've no any kind of ancestral ties to like the military, anything like that. And growing up where I grew up, there's not that much of like a military influence either. There's it's always a question of like where did this interest start? And I honestly don't know. It could have been. I remember we had a VHS copy of Pearl Harbor, and
Hmm.
I know I must have watched that like 1,000 times. And then there was also, yeah, I honestly think it had to have been the Green Army Men games
Yeah.
because there's like I don't have any other influence like outside of that kind of pushed me towards this interest in like weapons
Yeah.
and tanks and like all this other stuff.
And now, what made you, start creating content for YouTube? You said, one of your friends said, hey, make a video. Was that what just drove you essentially?
Yeah, I toyed around with some content creation for Destiny 1 when that game came out, just because I was making guides and I knew that was like a good way to like kind of start getting people to watch stuff was guides. But when Squad came out, it was literally just raw gameplay and it was just such a good game. It was such a new game, such a excitable game on its own without any editing that
Hmm.
I literally just started uploading rounds and after a little bit I just consistency is just like when I look back at like how long I uploaded with the view counts I uploaded and it was like that was insanity. It was like maybe get like a couple hundred views here, a couple hundred views there for like 6 months, and then slowly it was just one of those things where either chicken or the egg. I don't know if my videos helped the game grow or Squad grew on its own, but either way something jumped the game in the channel, and I was just able to be on the Squad content game before anyone else,
Yeah.
and so that I just kind of rode that all the way up to where I'm at now pretty
Nice.
much.
Sort of like what Pestily did on the Tarkov side of things. He was one of
Hmm.
the first ones doing guides and everything like that. And just, things line up and, things go.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. It was just in really really early, and then something clicked somewhere, and everything popped.
Yeah. And now did you have any editing background beforehand, or, this is your first, let's slap some stuff together and go. And you taught yourself from there.
Yeah, just the self-taught stuff from when I was doing Destiny videos. I've never had any class or any instruction on like how to do any of the editing stuff,
Yeah.
but it was pretty raw. Like when I started, it was just press record and upload. I miss those days when it was that simple, but the bar has been raised quite substantially at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. And now do you still edit your own content, or do you have an editor for some stuff?
These days, I definitely have an editor for some stuff. It's as I kind of like diversify a little bit as far as what I'm doing. My time gets thinner and thinner, and so
Yeah.
having an editor helps. It's always one of the hardest things to find a good editor too.
Yeah.
But yeah, having an editor was definitely one of the bigger changes of like the last 2-ish years.
Yeah.
I still do like all the big videos that I like really am passionate about, but there's some that just need some cuts and stuff like that matched up to the VO. And it's just a easier way to
Yeah.
scale, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Two things on that. The whole of a lot of the creators that I've been on, that is one of their regrets is not getting an editor earlier to help them
Hmm.
free up to focus on other things. And then,
Hmm.
on the back end of that, the other part with editing is like you said, it was tough to find an editor. And a lot of people I've talked to is, finding that editor is tough because you want to find somebody who's editing to your style and just that you connect with, that creates the same content that as if you were editing it, they do it.
It was pretty rough to start because you're giving up creative control of what makes you as a content creator, and so it's there's a lot of anxiety involved, and there's a lot of control as a content creator you want to maintain. But I think for me, what helped was I had found a friend who wasn't necessarily an editor before,
Hmm.
but I kind of molded him from the ground up as far as like this is how I edit the video. So he didn't have any like other habits or other styles coming into like editing my stuff. It was
Yeah.
very much guiding him through the entire process, which was I don't really recommend. It takes so much time to do that, but that was one thing that I did that helped kind of put my mind at ease was building someone from scratch to kind of make sure that they were doing things as I would like.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's plenty of other ways to do it though.
Okay, cool.
Hmm.
And now when it comes to, creating your video, sort of what kind of workflow do you have from like, concept to finally like and subscribe? How do you approach a new video?
So I was really lucky as a squad creator with the kind of content that is that I could just play the game and have fun. That's how good the game was, how good the community was, that I didn't necessarily have to go in with like, okay, well today I'm gonna like try to do this and do that. I kind of just like got on and I played, and then it was just natural, organic, good content. Unfortunately, with like the game being 8 years old at this point, you can't really do that anymore. It's kind of been like, and the same thing happens in Tarkov and all
Right.
these other games. Like people have seen the majority of what they've been able to see. So nowadays, it's kind of the combination of, how can I create an environment or a gameplay style that is organic. I'm very much a fan of the organic stuff. To some degrees, it isn't really organic, because what I mean by that is the content I do now is very Arma focused.
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm just getting on and playing Arma, there's like the whole back end of like creating the unit, creating the server, creating the operation, and all this other stuff before it,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can just get in, hit record, and play, and then play it.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more work on that end now, these days, I think, and it's just preparing the entire environment for me to get on and just hit record.
Yeah.
Which is that bar continues to raise all the time. I see other creators coming out with awesome stuff, and it's kind of crazy how fast things move as far as what other people creatively are doing, and how the audience is always asking for more, something new or something
Yeah.
crazier in production.
Yeah, the stuff, the Arma stuff, first of all, Arma is fantastic for being a sandbox and for a game for being so old. But that was one of the things I was going to ask you about. When it comes to creating your Arma content, do you go in thinking, okay, I want to make a video, about this, and then you come up with a raid to match it, or you just really focus on the mission, and then, like you said, organically, whatever comes out of that mission is what you end up with to make a video?
I think the number one thing at the front of my mind always is the unit. Like what does the unit need? Sometimes the guys need more raid practice, so we'll just set up a raid. Or sometimes the guys will need, they're bored of doing raids and they want to do something else. At the end of the day, whenever I make an operation or when I'm going to record an operation, if I'm doing it, it's mainly like, how can I improve the guys in the group? And then whatever comes out of that will come out of it. There's two other things that I do that kind of get around that, because if I do it that way, then I kind of know to some degree what's going to happen or what we're doing. And that kind of spoils the fun for me. So we start doing larger PvP operations, which means the second you add in that, other player element, I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
And that kind of makes things exciting for me. So that was one thing, is like, we just put the other team in and whatever happens, happens. And then recently I helped, I partnered with Leru, who's another Arma content creator. And he does all of the operation stuff now, which I'm very thankful. He's an extremely skilled Arma mission creator. And that way I can just make sure my guys are ready, and then we load in, and who knows what he has planned for us that day.
Oh, nice.
So it's an awesome collaboration.
And now you keep using the term guys. When I'm thinking my guys, I'm thinking like 2 or 3 of us. But when you talk about guys in an Arma, are you talking about like, you're looking at a half a server of people? 20?
Yeah. So right now Cog is the unit that I've started, and that's pretty much a full platoon with attachments and an air stack. So at the end of the day, like everyone involved, probably numbers around 75 guys. It's not as big as like a lot of the other units. Some units are like in the 300s. It's like crazy amounts of people. But yeah, it's about 75 dudes that we go every Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. We all play together for a couple hours.
That is phenomenal to get that many people in, and you're not talking somebody who's coming in and just let's do a round of Fortnite. You're talking about somebody who has the comms and understands tactics. How did you develop the Cog, the team?
Yeah, it was first started out with like just an internal tight knit group, and then it kind of grew from there. But it very much leaned on the help of individuals like Controlled Pairs, or Grim, or Savage, or Justinred, or Siege, which are all military guys that have helped us out with like a lot of the questions that we had in the original creation of the unit. But after that, it's very much related to like how I grew up playing World of Warcraft as a teenager. Is like, like raids. You'd have raids in World of Warcraft, and you had like a team of 25 people, and you'd go in, and everyone had to perform and everyone had a job, and there was like a rewarding feeling attached to that. That was kind of the approach I took with Cog. Is like, I remember growing up and being part of a raid team that had like 4 days a week we'd have to meet. So like there must be a way I can kind of apply that formula to like the Milsim community. And so that's kind of what we did, but taking a lot of the real world authentic tactics and authentic execution from my friends and my contacts that I've been fortunate enough to have, and then just that was the goal, is like, let's do this as real as you can possibly do it, because we have the ability to reach out to these experts. And it's been a really cool experience so far, because I think there's a lot of stuff that we're learning that's like, you don't really get to learn unless you know these kinds of people firsthand.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, I had a special ops guy on one of the pods a while ago, and that purpose of that pod was to, here I have somebody who's professionally trained in as a military soldier coming on to talk about, comms in video games versus comms in real life, and is there an advantage? And yeah, it was just like he had a video of him with comms, like 2 radios, and like that's shit gets crazy.
Yeah, we're very fortunate in video games to have comms work all the time.
Yes,
which I know is a problem real world, where like comms drop out half the time. But yeah, it's been really exciting. I think one of the best things, or things that helps a lot at least, is we were able to attract a lot of like-minded people. And so I think at this point, about 50% of COG is like infantry combat related veterans or active duty.
Yeah.
And then maybe even more, a little bit more than that, is like a whole bunch of other MOSs or other roles within the military that have joined. So it's a pretty strong like vet or like active duty culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say we're a bunch of gamers, but there's a lot of dudes in there that just joined to have fun, executing certain things like they've learned from real world.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. And now, do you still go back and create, any guide videos, or really your focus is really on the Arma content?
Squad stuff has kind of dropped off for me a little bit. Milsim is a drug. Like hardcore Milsim is a drug where you continually push the limits of what is possible with a group of people, to where you reach a standard it is hard to go back down.
Mm-hmm.
So from squad, I did some light Arma stuff, and then from the light Arma stuff, we started the unit. And so there's different tiers, and Milsim is a spectrum. But once you play with like really, really locked in people, it does get hard to go back. I think right now, as far as the content's concerned, a lot of it is the operation stuff. And then I've tried to experiment with teaching people how to build a unit like that.
Yeah.
And that's where the guide stuff comes in. The problem with that is it's incredibly niche.
Yes.
It's incredibly niche. So yeah, it's not too much like general guide stuff these days.
And now, a big thing with YouTubers I've had on, the thumbnails, the titling, how have you approached thumbnail and titling?
I definitely have seen the bar there rise as well. Before it was just like, I'm just gonna grab this screenshot from this round that I played, just posted. Nowadays, you definitely have to put a lot of thought into title and thumbnail, and it's kind of exhausting. It really is. It makes sense as to why it's so important these days.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I'll be honest, like I don't even have like a successful or like a surefire title or thumbnail kind of strategy. It's kind of like I'll just kind of do what makes sense and try to make the title a little bit more poppy or a little bit more I don't want to say vague, but like pique interest or curiosity a little bit more these days, rather than just like US infantry battle versus Russians on this map.
Right.
It's like it was so easy back then. It was so easy, but yeah, it definitely takes some thought now.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, what is what's your take on the whole vertical content or short form content? Have you done much in that space, or that's another beast altogether?
It is. I have one friend, Bluedrake, who's done a lot of the vertical content, and he's been very successful at like really exploding with it. I think it's very easy if you have a strategy to really grow fast. The problem, I think you need another like macro strategy as to how you utilize that viewership, because the views on their own for vertical stuff is like just not on its own in isolation just not that beneficial. So like I think the strategy is like make good short form content somehow, and then maybe you point them to a product or you point them to something. Like the way I see short form vertical content is like it's a free ad for your content.
Exactly.
It's a free ad. I don't necessarily think, unless you do it a very specific way, it is enough as itself
Hmm.
to be like the only content you do to like sustain yourself. But I do think it's a very effective ad tool to an extent.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of Bluedrake, he'd been on previously, and
Hmm.
what a wild story he has from creating his game. Holy cow! That's
Yeah.
what he's gone through to get the game where it is just amazing.
Blue's a wild guy. I've known Blue for maybe 8 years now. He's definitely gone through a whole bunch of different evolutions, and like he finally got his game out the door, and it's like it's quite an achievement.
Yep.
And he's still charging. So I've always been amazed where he draws all the energy.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, since you've started down this path, what would you say is some of the harder things to constantly create videos that people are consuming and make this a career?
I think the hardest thing is not necessarily the content. The content is hard. It is definitely a challenge to figure out what people want and provide it to them. But I think the thing that burns people out the most is like the consistency, the amount of consistency required, and also the fact that like the human brain isn't necessarily wired to adequately like understand the social interaction or the parasocial interaction that occurs.
Hmm.
Like once you figure out the content or you enjoy or you love what you're doing, like the content you're creating, that's the first step. And that's rather easy because it's simple, it's in your face, and it needs to be handled. The next thing is being consistent. And that's just a thing that's like, you got to be okay with doing it just because you love it. And that, reaches back to like, I enjoy doing this. I'm going to keep doing this without the expectation that it explodes overnight.
Hmm.
Being prepared for that grind, because it is a grind. I think everyone sees a creator and is like, oh, this guy just popped off. But that's very rare. For the most part, like Pestily or like, other creators, like they'd been doing it for a long time before they exploded. That would probably be the second thing. And the third thing is just like, once you hit a certain level of like, just being known, you start to see like the really weird parts of society, whether it's like people, you are now something that people talk about, where
Hmm.
you like, that's hard to prepare yourself for, where it's like, I don't know these people. I'll just go into a subreddit and people are like throwing my name around. It's like, that's like, it's a very weird thing to see the first time it happens.
Yep.
Or like people just saying random things that have never happened, or just like making accusations and stuff.
Hmm.
And it's really strange. You see it happen with like every creator. It's going to happen eventually. And that is probably one of the biggest things that like, you're never going to be prepared for that to a certain extent. It's just a weird relationship to have, or a weird kind of, social thing to have occur, and just being okay with that. Cause I know the hate can burn out a lot of people. I know people get a lot of flack for doing some things, or not even doing them, just having them accused of happening. Like, oh, this guy said this thing on this podcast about, the game being wrong or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just like, it can get crazy. And it's just really weird to watch happen sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you're the slightest bit polarizing, like I had, I've talked to Veritas a few times, and he shared some comments he's received. And it's just, people are just mean, straight up, just can be assholes,
Yeah, it is crazy. It is oh god, and it's so funny how the mind works, right? Because the mind, I could go through 1,000 good comments a day,
Mhm.
and then you see like one that is like not even true, but it's just some dude saying things like, God, damn, it's like
Right.
stuck in my brain now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
funny.
Yeah. So now, since you started this, when did was there a certain moment, or was it just a gradual increase of your popularity of your videos where you knew you could take this as a career or full time?
Um, so the way that I had done it was kind of weird. It was just videos to start, and then because of the videos, I actually was hired by New World Interactive, which was the game company that did Insurgency, and so they were paying me to make some video guides directly for their game, and that kind of helped me get
Oh, cool.
my feet wet and get me started, because it was a job. Like there was an
Mhm.
actual job attached to the content that I was kind of creating, and so that kind of showed me that like, okay, this is, this can really turn into something somehow, whether it's, working with a game studio or like on my own. And then at some point, yeah, it just clicked. I think it was maybe a year before COVID that things really started to pick up and the game started to pick up, and it was just ad revenue at that point. Just YouTube ad revenue that really carried me. And
Yeah.
then the COVID bump hit, and that was like a really big growth period for like a lot of content creators.
Mhm.
But for me especially, it was a really big bump in squad as well, and that kind of just set the tone and was like the foundation for everything else.
Okay. And now, what was it like when do you remember when that first video hit and exploded? Do you remember what was that video that really sticks out the most, and what was your reaction to it?
It's funny because I think a lot of squad content or a lot of Milsim content in general is very slow burn. It's very rare to have like a video unless it's like exceptionally unique or evoking to have
Mhm.
it pop off overnight. So generally the way that the views go for like Milsim content, at least in my experience, is the video will come out, it'll do all right, and then over the course of the next month or two, then it'll just like gradually just slow burn like grow. And that it's never like a pop overnight the video's viral and everyone's watching it. It's like, oh my god, this is insane. It's always like a look back a month later, and that video I did a month later is now growing. It's just strange. But the first one I did, which was really funny, that ever broke 1 million views, was same thing. It was just old squad content, literally hit record, and I was sick during the entire video. So it was just it was a raw video of me sitting down playing squad, and you could just hear me coughing like every other minute. And I was like,
Oh,
this is terrible. This is awful. Why does this have 1 million views? And so that kind of showed me like it's kind of random. Like it's
yep.
kind of weird how all that works. Because like in my opinion, it's like a terrible video. But it was my first 1 million view video. It's very
That's
strange.
wild. And I saw, I was looking through your videos, and like you've got one for Tarkov that's, north of 2 million views. And it's just,
Hmm.
that is wild to think about that number. And, the amount of people watching that video is just insane.
Yeah, I think that series that I did for Tarkov was definitely one of the things that also bumped me up as well. That was like more of a guide walkthrough style series, and that everyone loves that stuff. And that
Yeah.
was also just in time when Tarkov was hitting its massive boom.
Yeah.
So it was just right time and the right content at that place. And so it was very interesting. I do think that was some of the content I enjoyed making the most,
Hmm.
because the way I did it was just live recordings, but the way I play Tarkov is a little weird, I guess, and I'm able to just download the brain stream like vocally as it's coming out live,
Yeah.
and that was very entertaining for people because I could just exactly talk what was going through my mind exactly as it was happening, and it was helping a lot of players kind of understand the thought process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do wish I could do one of those series again. I just don't know if I could stomach Tarkov that much.
Now,
We'll see.
was this because you spent so many hours playing Tarkov, or just the mechanics of it when you started playing other Milsim games like Arma or Squad, you really saw where the deficiencies were in Tarkov?
It was definitely just me playing a lot of Tarkov. I
Yeah.
don't think a lot of people knew that beforehand. Like I played a ton of Tarkov. Like I played back when like it was really small, and like the thing to do was to farm factory for fort armor. Like that was the thing to
Oh
do.
my
It
God.
was like it was like old school Tarkov,
Yeah.
and then I popped off, and people were like, "Oh, who's this guy who's never played Tarkov before? He's making guys." I was like, "I've been playing Tarkov before you even knew about this game." But yeah, it's definitely at this point there's a lot of knowledge out there,
Yeah.
and it was good because like Tarkov doesn't teach you how to play the game.
No.
It just throws you in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it prepared you for Arma, because Arma doesn't show you
Mm.
how to play the game, and you're sort of thrown in there based on whatever, I guess, mission or whatnot's been created for you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
most definitely.
And now, over the years, what is sort of, the highlight for you since you've, uploaded that first video? Anything in particular that sticks out?
Um, anything that sticks out since that video? I think one of the things I leverage a lot these days is I'm very public as a content creator to a degree, as far as like it's easy to play with me to a certain, or it used to be very easy to play with me because I played squad, which is like, there's 100 players on the server, public server. You can pop in, you can play, and we can interact, and it was it was cool like that. And for Arma, same thing. I hosted a public server. I hop on, you hop on, and we can talk and we can chill. And so that was very unique, I think, from a lot of ways that content creators kind of approach their communities, where they're more or less siloed off in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of instances, to where like I make the content and then maybe you'll see me in game a little bit, but I get pretty involved with my community, whether it's squad or Arma. And so I think one of the things that I really enjoyed over those years is like because of the increase in, I guess, popularity, it made it very easy for me to build communities and to build experiences based on those communities,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be the unit that I'm leading now or whether it was the One Life squad operations we did over those years or it was the Arma 3 Liberation server. That's something I've always enjoyed is like creating an experience that we can all enjoy because I think the teamwork aspect is what really makes a lot of these games enjoyable in my perspective. And so, hey, if I have a natural, organic way to foster teamwork, like I utilize that quite heavily throughout, gaining that popularity.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And now,
Mhm.
what has been sort of, if somebody's thinking about making some YouTube videos, Milsim content perhaps, what kind of advice would you have for somebody?
I would say definitely you have to like going back to those three things. You have to love what you're doing. You like don't think about what the end is going to be like because it's going to be a very long journey to get there unless you have some secret sauce. The second thing is just be consistent with it even when the views are down and you don't necessarily notice. Like you just have to continue self-improving and continue to be consistent. And then the third is like just prepare yourself mentally and just understand that some people are just going to say things and some people are just going to go crazy and that's going to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a good thing when that's finally happened, okay, my name is getting out there. Something is happening. But yeah, those three things, you just have to be ready to do it. And then it's hard now. Like I'm not gonna lie, it's probably harder than it has ever been with like the amount of content creators that are trying to make content with games or with whatever it is. And you got to figure out like what makes you different. I know
Mm-hmm.
that's very like cliche or very standard advice, but it is not an easy ride right now. And I respect anyone trying to push through because it's just so loud with all the social media now.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So yeah, it's just that's what I'd say, I
All
guess.
right. And now, from a live aspect, streaming aspect, you have a Twitch channel. It doesn't look like it gets used a lot. Do you
Mhm.
stream live much?
I am an introvert at heart, honestly. So being on camera for 3 hours, 4 hours to stream is pretty exhausting for me personally. I used to do streams, and it requires a unique mindset to be able
Mm-hmm.
to stream. I think it really does, unless you have a specific special style of doing content.
Yeah.
It is very taxing for me, and so I kind of dropped off from doing it. I definitely should be doing it more. Like as a content creator, I think doing some live is definitely the way to go, or definitely like how to maximize your effective reach.
Mm-hmm.
It's just for me. There's other things that require my attention right now, and it's just also just I do like it to a degree, but every time I finish a stream, I want to just sleep. It just knocks me out. It
Well,
just knocks me out.
it is tough, and before I found Tarkov and did this, like, come on, streaming video games is easy, but you have to be on. You can't be miserable.
Mhm.
If you're on camera, you have to, you have to have it on essentially, and it is draining. I've done a few hours, and it's like, oh my god, how do these people do 8 or 10 hours, 5 days in a week? It's
Mhm.
crazy.
It's insane. Like these people who stream full time, like I'm in awe because I could never do that. Yeah, it's just being live all the time also just weirds me out a little bit because like I'm a little careful with like just coming from a YouTube background of
Mm-hmm.
like what kind of stuff I upload. So like the idea that everything I upload is on the internet forever is
Yes.
like is like live stuff is like kind of like weird to
Yep.
me just because I'm used to editing, get it good, put it up.
Yeah.
So it's a different mindset, I think.
Well, and there's a few. I think there's a lot of benefits to being a sort of a content creator for YouTube versus the streaming aspect. Is like you can work at your own pace. If you're not feeling it that day, a sick day, or you want to go on a vacation, you can sort of put some effort on the front end, create some videos, schedule them to upload. Versus on a stream when you're streaming live, you got to stick to that schedule.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons for both. I definitely think So there's some times where like every now and then I'll be like, oh, you know what? It'd be awesome if I was a Diablo streamer, like or like a World of Warcraft streamer. Like I could, like if I had a following and I was doing like World of Warcraft stuff or Diablo stuff, I think I could do it.
Yeah.
But I think very specifically for like Tarkov or from like Squad or like Arma, like the game itself is already extremely mentally taxing, or like the way that you have to play those games is
Mhm.
like I like if I just play Tarkov for 3 hours, like I'm like exhausted after that. But then also having to interact with chat and whatnot, it's like it's especially exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it depends on the game. There's some streamers I'm definitely envious of, like RTS streamers or like some of those chiller games. Or I know there's
Yes.
like some Sims streamers. I'm like, yeah, that seems like chill. You just sit back and just like mess around and
Yeah.
stuff. But yeah, the games that I play is doesn't really allow for that.
No. And now speaking of the games you play, it's there is a balance you try to structure with those games between realism, immersion, and finding that happy balance, because you don't want to have it over the top where it's not enjoyable to play. What's your take on, what is a game that really does that well?
I think Squad hits a pretty decent balance, just because like it's got enough action in it, it's got enough teamwork in it if you know how to utilize it.
Hmm.
But I speak from a very, I guess, privileged position because I know how to cherry pick or create a community that makes the Squad server an enjoyable place to be.
Yeah.
I think if you play as an individual and you just like, oh, I'm just gonna like log onto a random Squad server, I think that experience can be pretty rough, just because like you get into a squad, no one knows what's going on, no one's talking. um for me, being able to pull a pool of guys that kind of know how to play the game and like all have the same kind of play style, a squad's definitely, I think, the best one that does it.
Hmm.
Tarkov does a decent job, but Tarkov is just exhausting for me.
Yeah.
Just because I'm slightly competitive in nature. Like I don't like losing, I don't like dying. So that stuff will tilt me. Like I'll get tilted in Tarkov. But it does have some really good mechanics. It does. And I think the fact that Tarkov can evoke those kind of emotions is like a really unique thing in the FPS genre,
Hmm.
because like you don't really get that adrenaline spike in Squad. You don't really get it in Arma, but in Tarkov, like you fear, at least when you first start playing and
Yes.
you don't get how everything works, you fear for like your life with
Right.
what you have. You've got your, you've got your gas analyzers on you, and you're like,
Exactly.
I
Yes.
need to extract.
Oh.
So
And
there's some
Karmakut,
cool things.
the gas analyzer quest is still there after all these
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, that's what worries me every wipe. It's like, oh, I could play Tarkov and do everything all over again that I've
Yes.
done. It's like, I don't know, man. It's just kind of rough.
Yeah.
Uh yeah.
Now, I've wanted to play. Like I see the videos, you've made and others made with Squad and Arma, and it just flows so well together. But like you said, you're that one random guy who's coming in to play Squad. Your experience is completely different because
It
you
is.
don't know the comms. You don't have buddies that play. It's a daunting game. Those are daunting games to try to get your foot in the door, essentially.
They are. I think that is like the biggest downfall of like military style games is like the learning curve is really steep. And even in Tarkov, like the games just don't teach you anything. They just don't have any good tutorial or new player experience. I think that really does need to be a focus for like any game that comes out, or even for these games to go back and revamp it, because it is extremely daunting coming in without any friends or any knowledge of like what's going on, and then getting yelled at because you don't know what's happening. And it's it's definitely rough. I think for someone trying to get into it, the best advice I can offer is like a lot of the work that goes into playing Milsim is finding the group. Like
Hmm.
going back to like how I had to create the environment. It's a lot of work in that sense. It is. It's not like a simple thing you can just hop on and play. I mean, some people do manage to get there, and eventually end up just hopping on and playing games and having fun. But I think to maximize the enjoyment out of those kind of teamwork oriented games, you do have to find people that want to use teamwork, and sometimes it can be the death of your experience is just not having that good first or second or third experience trying to find those people.
Right. And then also, you're learning the game, but you're also learning, like I watched your video, this game will forever the king of
Oh,
realistic warfare. And the
mhm.
comms are like over the top. It's like I have no idea what you're talking about half the time. And if I'm coming into a game like that, a game can't teach you that, though. I think you need,
Hmm.
like you were talking about, you get into a community and, they sort of take you under their arm or under their wing, and you sort of, like you said, a lot of people are afraid to even talk because, all right, your headset's going to blow up with everybody yelling at you, like, what are you doing over there?
Yeah, and that's another thing is like there's so many different like layers of Milsim. You have like chill sim, they
Yeah.
call it, or like really really laid back stuff, and then you have like the really wired stuff that we do. So there is a spot. I think there is a spot for everyone. It's just finding that spot for you and your friends. And like what I do is like way over the top, like to the upteenth level. And that has been a challenge as well because like I'll edit the video, I'll make the video. I'm like, dang, that was so authentic. That was so awesome to do. And then I'll upload it and like, or I'll ask like a friend that is not in the scene, like, oh, what do you think of this? It's like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what you're talking about. It's like, damn. So that's like a constant battle I have now is if I take things to like the most authentic level,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes incredibly hard for the audience to digest
Yeah.
because it is so far down that road that they can't even understand what is being said or what is happening.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's definitely a struggle because like in my brain, like I want to keep that authenticity.
Yeah.
So I try to do some guide videos or not guide videos, but like the overlay videos before things happen to try to explain what's happening.
Yeah.
But it does make that kind of content even more niche.
Yeah. Yeah, but that that is a great idea though, or a great concept of you break down that the king of realistic warfare, and where the chunks where you're going to your map and yelling out
Mhm.
instructions like, oh, pause that, and here's the breakdown, here's why I'm saying this, here's why I'm doing that. But then that breaks the immersion of somebody watching that that video. So like you said, yeah, you're trying to find that sort of the balance.
Yeah, it's very difficult, and you start to realize a little bit like why Hollywood does what it does. Because like if it did it the other way, it's like no, it's like you'd be sitting in the movie theater, you're like, I don't even know what's going on. This is shooting and stuff. But yeah, it's always a constant battle, like authenticity, but how do I make this
Yeah.
digestible at this point?
And now, where did your, listening to your comms now, that doesn't happen overnight. So where did you start picking up comms, and was it just being around the community and picking it up?
I think in Milsim games, there's like a general understanding of like the basic comps of like copy or like over, or, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
And for the most part, like that basic stuff can get you pretty far in the majority of the military style experiences that exist. Because I'm really far over to the far extreme of Milsim. But learning the rest of it is literally hand taught from, and this is why I know it's so niche, is because like it's literally hand taught from like special operations guys that are in unit.
Yeah.
We have a lot of 75th Ranger Regiment guys that have supported the unit and have essentially trained the unit. And it is very unrealistic for me to expect people to understand the soft style language. And yeah, a lot of it was just having awesome connections and awesome friends, and awesome people to help, like Controlled Pair. I can't thank him enough.
Yeah.
He is like the basis for a lot of what we do. He's like the subject matter that has been helping us with all kinds of things that he's allowed to talk about.
Yeah.
And so it's been awesome to get that kind of experience, because a lot of Milsim communities and units, I think the trouble that they have is they just don't have that guidance, or they don't have that person or that expert to talk to. So
Yeah.
they kind of mumble it up, they jumble around, and they kind of like make things up on the go. And I think that's kind of also where a lot of the stigma behind like Milsim comes from, is like
Mhm.
people trying to be military and they say things incorrectly, and it just gives Milsim a bad look.
Yeah.
And that's where like a lot of people, when they hear the word Milsim, like honestly, to like the majority of people, when they hear Milsim, they cringe,
Right.
and rightfully so at this point, because like that has been the history of Milsim. It's like a lot of communities that don't really know what they're doing, but they like try to like dress up and they like try to do it, but it is completely wrong.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's one of my goals for like this short little bit here, is to try to educate people and try to help these communities to not do things so wonky.
Yeah. Absolutely. And when you were talking about that, I think immediately, I don't know if it was a Battlefield 4 video or Battlefield 3 video, where there was one over the top Milsim guy calling out everything he was doing, and everybody in the chat was like, what the hell is he talking about? And it was just like, and he just kept going. It's like, yeah, there's those guys, and it's,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Milsim definitely has like a very, very weird stigma attached to it. So like I'm hoping to potentially change that, like do my part to change
Yeah.
that, how it's perceived over the next couple years here. But it is a lot of cringe. I'll watch stuff and I will cringe very hard at what is happening. But it's also cool because like in some videos I'll see like how far my influence reaches. Because I'll spend a lot of time just like sometimes just going through on my YouTube feed and just watching some random Arma video of like a dude that's like sub 20 subscribers and he
Mm-hmm.
uploaded an Arma thing. And I'll see like our operation order or our plan, the template that we use for our plans,
Yeah.
like one to one copied in there. It's like, oh damn, these guys are like people are watching the stuff and they're trying to pick apart what they can use.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty cool to
That
see how
is.
far that spreads. Because even in Roblox, like there's Roblox Milsim and
No.
Roblox Milsim. Yeah, those guys are a different breed.
Oh God.
Um, but yeah, it's crazy. It can be cringe, but some guys do it right, and it's
Yeah.
just I gotta change the whole scene a little bit, I
Nice.
think.
All right, so now
Mhm.
here's more where my ignorance comes in from, from an armor squad standpoint. To me, it'd be cool if, I would think there's like, are there like tournaments or sort of competitions where, squads go up versus your, other squads or anything like that?
I think the only kind of competitive stuff that has ever existed in the Milsim scene is like Friday night fights. Squad does have a comp scene, but it is very much more like esports style
Oh,
comp,
okay.
where like the players just will use every advantage of the game to their advantage. And so that doesn't really mesh with like Milsim style
Ah,
stuff, just
yes.
because yeah, in order to have a Milsim style experience, the environment needs to be perfectly, or not perfectly, but like near perfectly realistic.
Yeah.
Because if you have anything that players can exploit, they will exploit it in nature, like in a PvP setting.
Yeah.
So Squad has too many of those. It's impossible to do. I think Arma is closer. You can kind of control the parameters a little bit more as far as like I could get very deep into this, but one of the things that we do is like we have an overwhelming air stack when we do raids. And so what that does by balance is like it feels oppressive, but it also makes the op 4 players play realistically. You're not going to go sprinting, running, gunning outside
Right.
because if you get spotted, you'll get a drone strike on your head. So it requires so much work to set the conditions for a
Mm-hmm.
realistic experience. So most competitive stuff and Milsim just don't mesh.
Makes sense.
They just unless you have something perfectly dialed in, which
Yeah.
is incredibly difficult to do.
All right. And now, we've been talking about Squad and Arma, quite a bit. We're talking, these games both are very old.
Hmm.
What do you see coming? Anything new coming from either of them? Arma, there's got to be an Arma 4 down the road. Arma I saw a video there yesterday or 2 days ago about a World War II mod that's coming out.
Hmm. Yeah, so there's some cool stuff happening. I think Squad is doing a really good job of continuing to push out new content. They're trying to mix things up, which I don't necessarily agree with everything they're doing, but they're doing things. They are
Yeah.
doing things. Tarkov is trying to do things as well, but at the end of the day, like Tarkov, Squad, Arma, it's all old. It is
Hmm.
all old to a certain degree. You can only do so much with those platforms by adding in like the new World War II DLC that you mentioned, or by adding in certain systems or adding in new factions. To a certain degree, I think the player base is going to want innovation somewhere. Like
Yeah.
as far as like this needs to be like a completely new thing or a completely new way to play those games in order for them to like really step to the next level past this. I think all games right now in the tactical scene are like pretty dry and everything's on like a sustain kind of state. Everything's kind of like let's just hold on to what we have and maybe make marginal gains.
Yeah.
Arma 4 is very far away. I wished it was closer. But Arma 4 is very far away. Reforger's like kind of doing things, which is like
Hmm.
the half step between 3 and 4, but it's mainly a console game at this point.
Yeah.
It's pretty dry out here. It is. It really is. And that's like the whole reason why we're going back to like that 10-year-old Arma 3 and trying to make new content. So it's a little worrisome, I think, as a creator in the
Hmm.
space. Uh, Hopefully, this next generation, I think there's quite a bit of new games that are like in early access stuff, like We the People
Hmm.
or I don't know, some other shooters, I'm sure,
Yeah.
that are like still coming out of early access. But it's just a lot of things, content creators, and I think Milsim Games right now are just treading water, unfortunately.
Yeah, we don't have, there's a lot of, sort of alpha footage coming out. You have, We the Few People. I had those guys on a week or so ago, and, 6 days to Fallujah. That's sort of not out. It's, it's out, but not fully complete yet. And, anything on the road that you're looking forward to, something that's, or either your guilty pleasure game that you play.
Right now, it's been Diablo 4 for guilty pleasure. I play a lot of Diablo 4 on launch, and when I have my free time, like that's what I enjoy playing. But otherwise, there's like a whole bunch of tiny, like you said, small projects coming out now. Geronimo is a cool one, really cool VR project I'm looking forward to. Operator's like a really new or really young game, but has like some cool things going for it. There's 6 days in Fallujah, which looks fantastic, but just doesn't have enough meat on it yet. I think, in all honesty, the next big thing would probably be Arma 4.
Yeah.
That's probably going to be it. Like, these small games are great, but I don't necessarily know if they have the teams behind them to really push anywhere big in the short term here soon. So it's probably going to take a while.
Yeah. And you just touched on one, VR. You playing anything? Have you tried Ghost of Tabor or any of those?
I have a love-hate relationship with VR. I do. Controlled Pairs is a big VR freak, as I'm sure he's told you.
Yes.
He tries to get me in a lot of it. I just, I don't think the graphics are there yet. Geronimo looks like the most, I guess, realistic style shooter. But yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I'm just not sure what it is about VR that I just don't quite enjoy. It's just hard for me to play. I'll have fun once every now and then, but it's just not yet there for me.
Yeah, makes sense. And now something I did see, you had the squad dynamic direction mod. What was that?
So I've had a lot of experience, going back to like trying to create these experiences for communities. There's a kind of game I want to play in my head, or a kind of style of Milsim I want to play in my head that doesn't exist. And I've always been trying to create it, whether it's via modding for Squad or even modding for Arma 3, as far as like creating that next generation style of playing Milsim. Dynamic direction was like a short-lived run at trying to achieve that goal. Squad SDK is just terrible, and the modding for Squad is just horrendous, which is why there's like 3 or 4 playable mods for the entire game.
Wow.
But it was essentially trying to fix all the problems that Squad had, whether it's slowing down the gameplay or making players play together, trying to make it a little bit more accessible, a little bit more controlled, and fresh. And so I really do try my best wherever I go in whatever game I play to try to improve it. Like I've did a couple mods for Insurgency Sandstorm. We're still actively modding for Arma 3. It's just like a big thing is, I think, in the whole tactical shooter or Milsim genre is modding. Like Squad was born from modding. Insurgency Sandstorm was born from modding. I think that's kind of the theme amongst the games, is like all these games are born from someone or a group of individuals trying to provide a better, more realistic answer to the big realism question. So who knows what happens, but like that's always been a drive of mine, is like I'm always experimenting, trying to create a better experience, a more realistic experience, a more immersive experience. And so dynamic direction was my first main attempt at that.
Oh, cool. All right, so we're going to switch gears here a little bit. So I saw a quote from your, one of your Instagrams saying, an airsoft LARPer shooting real steel. So you got, I saw a cameo of you in Controlled Pairs video where you took a whole bunch of gamers, shooting. How was that?
Yeah, Pairs is such a great guy. Pairs organized this meetup with a whole bunch of his community friends, and I was invited to come out. And we have a mutual friend in Georgia that has access to a whole array or arsenal of firearms, from like AKs to like marksman rifles to full auto weapons. And so we all went out and we shot. And it was really cool. It was really cool to see someone kind of bring everyone together. Because like growing up in California, that's not really a thing. Like the gun culture is pretty sparse out here.
Yes.
So that was my first time seeing a whole bunch of people come together to like shoot and like learn and Pairs was doing a little bit of instruction and or a little bit of like guiding, and
Hmm.
it was just cool to see that kind of happen as a community event because that's not something I'm used to, and it was really enjoyable. And I think it was fun to finally shoot. I'd shot once before,
Hmm.
but it was fun to finally shoot like in a more free setting,
Yeah.
because I think before it was pretty restricted in the environment that I was shooting. But this one was like we had a big open bay, we had a whole bunch of guns to shoot, we had a whole bunch of experience to that was shared with us. So it was a cool experience for sure.
What was, what was your main impression of, when you fired, the AR or, whatever else you shot? Was it like, wow, or was it like, holy crap, that's really loud?
The loudness is definitely the first thing you notice. Is like, oh wow, that's pretty loud. The second thing is like you get used to it pretty fast. But like the most surprising thing I think for both Pairs and myself was like how comfortable I was operating the weapon system and
Hmm.
operating these different AR platforms because of Airsoft.
Yeah.
Like it felt very natural to me. Like I knew where the gun should go. I knew how to reload. I knew how to work the fire controls. It was pretty interesting to see how almost one to one it is,
Yeah.
aside from the fact that you're shooting something lethal and like can hurt someone and makes a big boom. Um, but it was pretty cool to shoot all these other guns, I think,
Hmm.
because that was when things started to get a little uncomfortable or a little, I guess, foreign, is like shooting MP5s or UMPs or
Yeah.
like AKs. Like I'd never dealt with any of those, even in the airsoft sense. And it was cool to see how the physical properties or like the physical feedback you get from shooting all these different
Yeah.
platforms, how they all differed to an extent.
Even the weight too is surprising. It's like, holy crap, this
Mhm.
is heavy. And then if you add on, armor or helmet, it's like you're not running and jumping, and there is serious strength required to be an operator.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that's something that you kind of like people will hate that I'll say. Like you kind of get that experience a little bit in airsoft, just because a lot of the guys do wear like I would wear real plates or like real armor just because like that's part of the experience. Just
Right.
gotta live the whole. If you're gonna LARP, like LARP.
Yeah.
So yeah, you kind of get that experience of like, oh yeah, this is physically taxing. Like I can understand how quickly you get gassed, how thirsty you get,
Hmm.
like how sweat gets in your eyes. Like you, that's one of the things I think that once again, just like Milsim in gaming, Milsim in airsoft also gets a bad rap because you have a large amount of the community, or maybe not even large, but some of the community is just ultra mega cringe. That really kind of sets it apart. But there's I think a lot of the gun world recently has poked its head into airsoft as a training tool and has given airsoft a little bit more credibility as
Yeah.
a recreational or even like athletic experience. Because you do learn a lot from airsoft if you know what to extract
Hmm.
from it, right? If you know like the physical stress that it creates, or even the gear, like that is something that airsoft will help you shake out. Is like, where do you put your stuff? How well do you tie it down? Um, does your gear work? Does your kit fall off? That's the main thing that you'll learn in airsoft.
Hmm.
In addition to, I should probably work out more.
Yeah. And
uh,
airsoft also gives you tactics too,
a little
yeah.
bit, yeah, a little bit.
Abs-
There's a lot of bad habits you can definitely learn from airsoft. So I try not to keep too much of that information in my brain.
Mhm.
But it's definitely fun. It's a good way to spend time with friends. It's enjoyable, and I think it is definitely just like Milsim and gaming, just tainted a little bit
Yeah.
from a lot of loud bad experiences from people.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I think that following trip, we'd done the same trip again later,
Yeah.
and that was immediately after one of the big airsoft Milsim events in Georgia. We went and shot
Oh,
again,
cool.
and so yeah, it was cool because like we just wore the same thing we wore to the airsoft event, but we
Yeah.
picked up the real rifles and we shot. And so that was a lot of fun. It's Georgia's an interesting place. I don't know if I would ever move there, but it's a fun place. It's
Yeah.
definitely a fun place.
And now
Mhm,
Pears also took it to the next level. He had nods or NVGs for you guys, right?
mhm.
What was that experience
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, night vision is insane. It's overpowered. It's definitely overpowered. A lot of the Milsim events that we go to, actually, you'll have people bring nods out, and that is when you really see, oh my god, this is a superpower. because you could literally walk directly around or behind someone on the field. But yeah, shooting under nods is really cool. That one mutual friend that Pairs and I have,
Mm-hmm.
he has like a whole bunch of nods and a whole bunch of like the next gen stuff. And so being able to see the difference in like old generation stuff to new generation stuff is very eye opening as well. Just because like I think video games for a long time had the impression of like you throw the nods on and it's this disgusting green smear and you can
Right.
barely see anything. Yeah, next generation nods are cheating. It's like White Foss PVS 31. Just like you can see everything
Wow.
basically. Yeah, it's pretty crazy how well those work so long as there's like some ambient light.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely very eye opening as a gamer to get my hands on some nighttime shooting.
Very cool. And now, touching over to airsoft. So I saw a video you had an experience of storming a 747 with,
Mm-hmm.
what was that? So what was that experience? What was I think it was like professional training simulator or something like that.
So PTS is a group that makes like a lot of cool airsoft clones of like real world tech that's licensed, or like real steel tech, I should say. And so there's like this is one of the things that's like it's cool, but it's also like not realistic, and so things can get kind of funky. Is like that 747 thing, like that's insane. It was a lot of fun to do. But it's not necessarily a realistic event. It's kind of like a fun like challenge thing, but there's like so you start to notice so many limitations or differences between airsoft and real world or even gaming where like BBs don't go through objects.
Right.
They also have like a limited distance. And so
Mm-hmm.
like that dramatically changes what you can do when you're in that situation. Like if we were ever to storm a 747 with that kind of situation, like you would just shoot, you'd get shot through seats and everything. And
Right.
that's one of the things. Yeah, that's one of the things that airsoft really opened my eye to is like it's lethal. Like real world like gunfights are lethal. It is very easy. You just walk in the door and you die. You just shot by a BB.
Yeah.
And it's like it's kind of eye opening to see like, oh, a lot of people think like you get into a gunfight and you're there for like 3 hours, and like sometimes that happens. But if you're this close to an individual, like someone is going to get shot very quickly.
Yeah.
And so that experience was cool because I don't think many people get to play airsoft in a 747. But the event was definitely geared towards like, let's have fun in these airplanes
Yeah.
rather than like, let's teach you how to storm this thing.
And now, do you do still a lot of airsoft these days?
Unfortunately, the field that I go to like burned down as a part of like a California wildfire,
Oh
so we're
shoot.
still waiting on that to get rebuilt.
Yeah.
Um, I went to a couple of events, and I think like you kind of grow as well. Milsim and gaming and airsoft have like a lot of parallels. Like you'll go to the field and play like your public games,
Yeah.
and then you'll go to like some events, and then you become only an event player, and you only go to the most hardcore events. And it's kind of that's the progression I think for both video games and airsoft. So at this point, I'm more so along the event only kind of guy,
Yeah.
but I've just been so busy recently, I haven't had the time.
Okay. And now we've talked about, Pairs, Bluedrake. How did you end up, in your circle, in the Milsim circle, there's a few of you, and how did you end up meeting, hooking up and, connecting with all of them?
So Blue, like I guess you could say, scouted me early. When I was a very young content creator, like sub 20K, I think. He noticed my content and he was like, "Hey, we should talk. Like, you got some cool stuff going on." So I really will say, like, Blue mentored me for like a decent amount of my early content creation career, and so that's how we kind of connected. Controlled pairs, I think, like honestly, it's kind of funny because I don't remember an exact instance of how I met pairs. I think we just played a little bit together,
Mm-hmm.
and then we just started playing more together or something like that. But there was no like, oh, hey, what's up? I'm Controlled Pairs. I'm Karma. Let's like do this thing. It was like a really gradual, like actual, more of a friendship rather than like a creator connection or like a collaboration. It was
Yeah.
very much like I see him like not necessarily someone I met through business, but just someone I met as a friend doing certain things.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, a lot of the other creators like Drewski I met through events. Devil Dog met through some gaming events. I think that's the main way that I meet the majority of other individuals, is just like there's some event going on, we all end up being there and we end up meeting, and then yeah, we'll play together actually, or something like
Nice.
that. Yeah. Mhm.
Very cool. And now, when you're done making your videos, what do you like to do away from the computer? And, if you're not doing any events with Airsoft, what's your
Mhm.
sort of hobbies?
I do like a lot of TV and movie stuff. I think as I just enjoy seeing a lot of the cinematic stuff and just like learning a little bit from like
Mhm.
how they do it and applying it to my videos, like how to make things more cinematic and movie like. That's definitely something. I still I played a lot of card games as a kid. I play a lot of board games as an adult. So like
Nice.
a lot of these big box, designer board games I'll play. I've always enjoyed like figuring out how those game designs work to an extent. Um, but yeah, TV eating, a
Yes.
lot of eating, a lot of eating, a lot of shows, and a lot of board games. I'd say are the three ways outside of like content creation, airsoft stuff that I do.
All right. What's on the watch list right now that you're watching from a TV show standpoint?
We just wrapped up Silo. I'm a big sci-fi guy.
Yeah.
So Silo was pretty good on Apple TV. That was a pretty interesting show. I think the next thing to watch is probably going to be. It's pretty dry right now for sci-fi too, honestly. But any sci-fi show that comes out, I'll generally watch, even if it's bad. Like it's how much I like sci-fi stuff. Waiting on the next Dune movie,
Mhm.
for sure. But I'm trying to think. I'll just go back and I'll watch a whole bunch of. I just recently watched Blood Diamond and Beasts of No Nation
Yeah.
again. But yeah, I'll just go back and I'll watch anything military or sci-fi just to get another experience of it and just see what I can pick from it, both for my content and just for fun.
And now, does Star Wars fall in sci-fi? Because some people look at sci-fi
Yes.
and they don't. It's like, it is sci-fi. It's Star Wars.
I know, yeah, I consider Star Wars sci-fi. I know people think it's like space opera fantasy
Yeah.
stuff, but I do enjoy a lot of Star Wars stuff. I think there's the new sequels or the new trilogy was kind of meh.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of other good stuff coming out of Disney too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
I think
so I'm definitely a big Star Wars guy.
Rogue One was the one that's just I think is probably one of my favorites.
I would agree with you 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
100% Rogue One is definitely up there for me.
It kind of is the darker one, and then like at one point it's like, holy crap, they're all going to die, and it was just
Mhm.
yeah, and then seeing the Vader's power at the end was just
Yeah.
it's really good. I enjoyed that one.
Yeah, super gritty. I wish they did more of that kind
Yep.
of stuff.
Absolutely.
I'm praying for like a real life adaptation or like a TV show adaptation of like the Republic Commando series.
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah.
think that'll ever happen, but that would be so sick to see like a whole TV show series based on Republic Commando. I think that'd be dope.
That would be cool.
But yeah.
Absolutely. Any plans this year? Any goals you want to hit?
Just grinding. A lot of it right now is a lot of the challenge is just figuring out how to make an old game look good.
Yeah.
Uh, I might jump into the new Tarkov stuff, but like as far as big plans, just chugging, just grinding, waiting for the next thing. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Karmakut, you survived the podcast. Hopefully, it wasn't too painful. But
No, it was awesome. It was awesome.
But before you go, I got to ask you to call out somebody who you think has a good story to come on. Control Pairs called you out, so who you passing the baton on to.
Who am I passing it to? I would say Leru is definitely like an awesome. I'll give you maybe two here.
All right.
Leru is definitely an awesome big name in the Arma community.
Yep.
A lot of experience creating missions, and he's got a lot of cool insight into Milsim from his perspective.
Cool.
And then who else would I call out? Let's see. Justinred, probably
Okay.
another one. Another he's very much in the prior service, became a content creator,
cool.
more serious vet style of content creation. So he probably has some awesome things from his perspective as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, those two are pretty cool creators in my vertical that I think don't get heard too much and have some pretty interesting things to say.
Excellent. Well, that's what this pod's about. Getting those people on and sharing their stories. Awesome.
Mhm.
All right. Well, hey,
Yes,
thank you so
definitely.
much, man. It was really awesome to meet you.
Awesome to meet you too. I had a great time. Yeah, this is awesome. I had a lot of fun.
Excellent.